All right, let's get going. White, said Bane. Don't speak to them unless they speak first. I saw them last night in a dream, began Sneebro. Pismir showed no surprise. You got one of their belts. You know when you really work hard at something, you're really putting yourself into your work? They mean it. Sneebro slipped the belt from his tunic, and without quite knowing why he did, tucked it into his pack. Behind him, the rest of the cart slowed down and drew to the side of the path. The white drawn wagon rumbled on until it reached the cairn. Both parties looked across at each other, when a small white left the cart and walked over to Sneebro and Bane. Close to, its robe could be seen to not just be black, but covered in crisscross faint gray lines. The deep hood covered his face. Hello, said the white. Hello, said Bane. Hello. The white nodded again. It stood there and said nothing else. Do they understand language? Asked Sneebro. Probably, said Pismir. They invented it. Sneebro felt the steady gaze from its hidden eyes, and he felt the hardness of the belt rubbing into his back, and he shifted uneasily. The white turned its gaze on to Bane. Tonight, we eat the Feast of Bronze. You are invited. You will accept. 7 only, when the nighttime fires are lit. We accept, said Bane gravely. The white turned on its heel and strode back to the wagon. Tonight, said Pismir, the Feast of Bronze? As if it was Feast of Sugar or Hair? Amazing. I thought they'd never invited strangers. Who's invited you? Growled someone from inside the cart. There was a stamping out, and Glurk's head poked through the curtains over the front. You know what I said about getting up, Pismir began, but since Glurk was already dressed, there was very little he could do except wink slyly at Bane and Sneebro. Whites? I thought they were just a children's story, Glurk said, after it had been explained to him. Still, it's a free meal. What's wrong with that? To tell the truth, I don't even know more on scrap about them, but I never heard of a bad white. I'd hardly heard of whites at all until now, said Sneebro. But you weren't alive when old Granddad was, said Glurk. He told me he met one in the Hares once. He lent it his axe. Did he get it back, said Pismir. No. That's a white, then, said Pismir. They tend to be so preoccupied to think about simple things. He said it was a good axe, too. There's no question of refusing to go, said Pismir. That's right, said Bane. But it's so easy to get things wrong. You know how sensitive they are? They've got all kinds of strange beliefs. You've got to know that, you two. Tell them, General. Well, said Bane, 7 is a very important to them. 7 elements in the carpet, 7 colors. Tell them about the chase. I was coming to that. There's 7 chase. They're like periods of time, but not regular ones. Sometimes they're short, sometimes they're long. Only whites know how long. Oh, remember the belt? 7 squares. Each represents a che. So the che of salt, you see, is a time when people prosper in trade, and the che of grit is when they build empires and walls. Am I going too fast? General, thought Sneebro. That's what Pismir called Bane. He wasn't thinking. And a general's a chief soldier, and now they're all looking at me. None of them noticed. He said. He tried to recall what Bane had been saying. Oh, so tonight's feast means we're in the Che of Bronze, yes? It means it's starting, said Pismir. It's a time of war and destruction, Glurk coughed. How long does that last, then? It'll last as long as the whites think it will. Don't ask me how they know, but tonight, whites all over the carpet will celebrate the Feast of Bronze. It's something they do with their memories. Sounds a bit unbelievable to me, said Glurk. Oh, yes, but that doesn't mean it isn't true. You certainly know a lot about them, said Snibro. I don't, said Pismir simply. You never know anything where whites are concerned. You remember tales, see things, pick up little bits of knowledge here and there, but you never know anything for certain. All right, said Glurk. He stood up on the driving board of the cart. We'll go. Don't see we can't do anything else anyway. Bertha'll come, Girth, and let's see, Damien Oddfoot. It strikes me that when a white asks you to dinner, you go and that's it, in sevens. They entered the whites' little camp sheepishly, keeping together. Whites always traveled in numbers of 7, 21, 49. No one knew what happened to any white left over. Perhaps the other ones killed it and ate them, Glurk suggested, who had taken a sort of a ancestral dislike to axe-stealing whites. Pismir told him to shut up. The oldest white in the group was the master. There were 21 in his group, and Pismir, looking at the chart, pointed out the big varnish boiler on top of it. Whites specialized in smelting the varnish that was mined at the Bismol, the giant pillar of redwood in the north known as a chair leg in Dumi. And they went from village to village selling it. Varnish could be cast into spearheads or knives or just about anything. Snibber wondered how long it would be before anyone noticed that he had shoved the belt into his pack. But he wasn't going to give up. He told himself they'd be bound to want it back if they saw it. There were 7 fires close together and 3 whites around each. They looked identical. How do they tell one another apart? Snibber wondered. Oh, there's something else I forgot to tell you, said Pismir, as the whites busied themselves over the cooking pots. They have perfect memories. They remember everything. That's why they find it so hard to talk to ordinary people. I don't understand, said Snibro. Don't be surprised if they give you answers before you ask the question. Sometimes even they get confused, Pismir went on. Never mind about them. I'm confused. They remember everything, I said. Everything that's ever going to happen to them. Their minds work differently. The past and the future are all the same to them. Please try to understand what I'm saying. They remember things that haven't happened yet. Snibber's jaw dropped. Then we could ask them, he began. No, we mustn't. Why, thank you, Pismir continued in a more normal voice, taking a plate from a white. That looks, delicious. They ate in silence. Snibber thought, do they say nothing because they already know what they said? No, that can't be right. They have to speak now to remember having said it, or... I am Norrell, the kin master, said the white on the left. My name... Yes. Yes. There was... I know. How? You're going to tell me after dinner? Oh. Snibro tried to think. Pismir was right. It was almost impossible to hold a conversation with someone who'd already heard it once. You really know everything that's going to happen? Was all he could think of. There was the trace of a smile in the depths of the hood. Not everything. How can anyone know everything? But a number of things I do know, yes. Snibber looked around desperately. Pismir and Bane were deep in conversation with whites and were not paying any attention to him. But supposing you knew when you were going to die, supposing a wild animal was going to attack you. Yes, said Norrell politely. You could just make sure you weren't there when you died, said White. That would be a good trick. No, I mean, you could avoid... I know what you mean, but we couldn't. It's hard to explain, or easy to explain and hard to understand. We have to follow the thread, the one thread. We mustn't break it. Doesn't anything ever come as a surprise? Said Snibble. I don't know. What is a surprise? Can you tell me what's going to happen to me, to all of us? You know, what's been happening already? It could help a lot to know the future. The dark hood turned towards him. It wouldn't. It makes living very hard. We need help, said Snibble in a frantic whisper. What's fray? Where can we go to be safe? What should we do? Can't you tell us? The white leaned in closer. Can you keep a secret? It said conspiratorially. Yes, said Snibble. Really keep a secret? Even though you'd give anything to tell other people? Even though it's like trying to hold a hot coal in your hand? Can you really keep a secret? Yes? Well, said the white, leaning back again. So can we. But enjoy your meal. Will I? Yes, you certainly did. The white went to turn away and then turned back. And you may keep that belt. Oh, you know I got the belt? Now I do. Snibble hesitated. Hang on, he said. I only said that because you... It's best if you don't try to understand, said Norval kindly. Snibble ate for a while, but the questions kept bothering him. Listen, everything happens, said Norval. Like a thread of the carpet, nothing can be changed. Even the changes are already part of the future. That's all you need to know. It was a strange meal. You could never be certain if the person you were talking to was listening to what you were going to say in 10 minutes' time or now. It's only cheered up a bit when one of the whites gave Glurk an axe. It was his grandfather's, although the handle and the blade had been replaced a few times. Bane and Pismire were quiet when the travelers went back to their carts. Did they tell you anything? Said Snibble. No, said Pismire. They never do. But this is the way they acted, said Bane. They can't help it. They don't like it. Wait, they don't like what it is they're not telling us, said Pismire. A week passed. The carts went on northward. Around them the carpet changed. On either side of the narrow track, the hares towered up, and now they were deep red. The fluff bushes, too, even the dust briars, grew in every shade of red. To Snibble, it seemed as though they were walking through a great fire that had been frozen suddenly. But it was a cool and peaceful. At night, for the first time since they had left the village, they heard no snargs. And that, of course, made people want to stop. At least for a few weeks, said Cadmick Holdgolder, the spearmaker, when several villagers came to Glurk's cart one evening. They've probably forgotten about us anyways, and perhaps we can go home? They don't forget, said Bane. Not them. Besides, we must go on. Head for where? You two can if you like, said Cadmick. As for me, as for us, we'll keep together, Cadmick, at least while I'm chief of this tribe, said Glurk. I don't think we're safe until I'm certain the nearest mole is long, long away. Makes sense to go ahead for where? Things will be better there. You'll see. If any of you think different, well, there was something in that well. It was a very deep well. It was full of unspoken threats. But there were still many angry mutterings. Then they came across the mole. It was while Snibble and Bane were walking ahead along the track, out of sight but still within hearing of the carts. Snibble said little. He kept thinking about General. He'd seen Doomy officers occasionally. Not often. Tregomaris wasn't very important. They didn't like it much. So far from home. Bane moved like a soldier. But people called General shouldn't go around looking shabby. And now they were going to wear. Apparently no one had discussed it. Suddenly, it was just seemed to be happening. Things would be all right in Ware, though. It was the most famous place in the carpet. Better than anywhere else. Safe. There were legions and legions of soldiers there. Bane was probably sensing his thoughts, but he was, unusually for him, chatting aimlessly about nothing in particular. Neither saw the mole until they were almost on top of it. It sat astride its snarg in the middle of the track, hand halfway to its sword hilt, staring straight at them with a look of terror. Bane gave a grunt. He drew his sword and almost fell over when Snibble's arm shot out and grabbed his shoulder. "What are you doing, you idiot?" "Look at it," said Snibble. "Observe," Pismir always said before acting. The mole had not moved. Snibble crept forward. Then, reaching up, he tapped the creature on its snout. Without saying a word, he pointed to the snarg's legs. Thick drifts of dust lay undisturbed around them. There was even a film of dust on the mole. It sat there, a statue, staring blankly at nothing. "How could it?" Snibble began. "I don't know. Pismir might," said Bane, rather roughly because he felt a bit of a fool. "Come on, you take its head, I'll take its legs." They gingerly unseated it from the snark and carried it, still in a sitting position, back to the carts. Snibble stuck his knife in the belt where he could reach it easily, just in case. But the mole seemed to be made out of grit. They found Pismir already fully occupied. Glurk had been out hunting and had come back with a wild pig, or at least a statue of one. "There was a whole herd of these," Glurk was saying. He tapped the pig with his spear. It went boing. "Should go oink," he told them, "not boing." Pismir took Snibble's knife and rapped the mole on the chest. It went ping. "Should go arg," said Glurk. "Are they dead?" asked Snibble. "Not sure," said Pismir, and one or two or more nervous watchers strolled hurriedly away. "Look." Snibble looked into the mole's eyes. They were wide open and a dull black, but deep in them there was something, just a flicker, a tiny imprisoned spark in the pool of darkness. Snibble shuddered and turned away, meeting Pismir's steady gaze. "Amazing," Pismir said. "Premature fossilization, and I didn't know there were any turgments in these parts. Tonight's guards had better be picked for the hearing." "Why?" said Glurk. "Because they better wear blindfolds." "Why?" There was a shout, and Yornobiris came running up with one of his hounds on his arm. On his arms? No, in his arms. "Heard 'em bark," he gasped. "Went to find 'em, found 'em like this." Pismir examined the hound. "Lucky," he said, vaguely. "I don't think so," said Urn. "Not him," said Pismir. "You." The dog was still in a crouched position, ready to spring, and its teeth bared and its tail between its legs. "What's a turgment?" said Snibble, finally looking away. There have been quite a lot of descriptions of the back view, said Pismire. Unfortunately, no one who's looked at one from the front has been able to tell us much. They get turned into stone. No one knows why. Amazing. Haven't heard of any for years. Thought they all died out. And that evening, Pismire himself nearly died out. He always held that goat's milk was essential for the philosopher. So not long after they had left the wood wall, he had bought a nanny goat from Glurk's small flock. Her name was Christabella, and she hated Pismire with a deep animal hatred. When she didn't feel like being milked, which was twice a day, it was part of camp life to watch her skitter between the carts with a hot and breathless Pismire cursing in pursuit. Mothers would wake their children to come and watch. It was a sight they'd remember for the rest of their lives, they said. This time she hurtled out between the carts and into the hares with a taunting bleat. Pismire scrambled after her, leapt down into the darkness, and tripped over her. Something retreated hastily into the shadows with a faint jiggling. Pismire came back holding the statue of the goat. He put it down silently and tapped its muzzle. It went ping. It should go blart, said Pismire. No one out of the camp tonight. That night, 10 men stood around the ring, their eyes tightly shut. Snibril was among them, and he stood by Roland, who wore blinkers. And they did it the next night too, and the one after that, after a cow belonging to the widow Mullock started to go ping, when it should have gone moo. Now, no one wanted to move on. They didn't break camp, but without anyone actually giving any orders, brought the wagons into a tighter circle. Once or twice they thought they heard jingling noises, and then on the third night Snibril was on guard by one of the carts, almost asleep, when he heard a shuffling noise behind him. Something big was in the bushes. He could hear it breathing. He was about to spin around when he heard the jingle of metal. It's here, he thought. It's right behind me. If I turn around, I'll be turned to stone. But if I don't turn around, will I be turned into supper? He stood quiet for 100 years or so. After a while, the shuffling grew fainter, and he risked the briefest look. In the dim light, he could see something bulky, at least twice as tall as he was, disappearing amongst the hares. I ought to call everyone, he thought, but they'd run around and shout and give one another orders and trip over things, and then it would have been long gone. But I've got to do something. Otherwise, we'll soon have a statue that goes ping when it should say hello. He found Roland and quickly put his brindle on. There was no time for a saddle. And then he led the horse very quietly in the direction of the jiggling.